OK, notre prochain présentateur, c'est Nathan Rabelais. So Nathan Rabelais is the Joseph P. Montiel Endowed Associate Professor of Francophone Studies here at the University of Louisiana at Lafayette. He specializes in and teaches courses on the folklore, literature, and popular culture of Francophone North America, particularly in Louisiana and Acadian communities of maritime Canada. He also currently serves as associate editor for the journal Études francophones and as a research fellow of the Center for Louisiana Studies. To contact him, his email is Nathan, Nathan, Rabelais, that's Rabalais, at louisiana.edu.
All right.
Yeah. It's kind of. Wait, read that.
Can you get a copy?
I guess I need to. It's not muted.
Okay.
Yeah. So I need to use this, like.
No, just use that for your audio.
Oh, okay. And then that's just for the. Okay. Wow. All right. So this is kind of all over the place. All right. So let's get started. Everyone can see this, okay? All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Y'all can hear me, okay? Not too loud in the mic. Okay. Well, I'm going to give kind of a maybe informal presentation, and I'd like to hear from y'all if anyone has any experience or connections with Elizabeth Brandon. It's a research project that I'm just starting, really. Okay? A little louder? It's a research project that I'm just starting, and it is through let me do a slideshow. Through the Thelma and Jamie Gilbo Special Collections Fellowship, and so this is something that I had applied for earlier this year, specifically to work on this new collection, which I know Josh and maybe Chris and Pud have worked on. So it's pretty recently cataloged and worked through, I think in 2020, especially during the beginning of the pandemic. And so it's really interesting. It's in the special collections at Dupree Library on the 3rd floor, if anyone's interested. It's got a lot of different things in there, especially mostly notes. A lot of notes from her dissertation research, after her dissertation research, as well as lots of correspondence, some really interesting things in there that I can talk about in a bit, from between her and Luc Lacourcière in Laval, with the American Folklife Center in DC. Really gives a lot of interesting insight into how she was working, what kind of questions she was asking herself in her research, and other things like this. There's also some, evidence of unfinished projects, which is another thing that I'm really interested in. So I'm working on a few different projects. Like I said, I'm really just starting. The fellowship period just started like in August, I think. So I'm kind of just getting into it. But I'm working a lot on sort of biographical information and to try to figure out, how she was going about her research and what was influencing her. And so it's a couple of different, articles and things, some more for the general public and some more academic. But it's a pretty sizable collection. It's 9 boxes of different things that I can talk about. So it's been surprisingly difficult to find out about Elizabeth Brandon's life. If y'all aren't familiar with Elizabeth Brandon, she is most known in musicology, ethnomusicology circles for her work, mostly in Vermilion Parish in Louisiana, and it was especially in the 1950s, I would say, is when she did most of her research. She collected many songs, at least I think 87 in her dissertation that was directed by Luc Lacourcière at Laval University. and also lots of folk songs. Her dissertation is really impressive. It's in 2 big volumes. It's also available in the special collections in the Louisiana room at Dupree Library if you're interested, but contains a lot of interesting study on language, expressions, superstitions, traditional healing, and of course lots of songs and folk tales. So I was always kind of curious about Elizabeth Brandon because it was someone that collected a lot. We have in the archives there's quite a bit of her material, audio recordings that are really interesting, and the quality is quite good, especially for the time period. So they're pretty easy to listen to. But she kind of stands out as one of the very few people not from here that worked on Louisiana folklore and traditional music. So I was always curious to learn more about her life and what brought her to that. She was born in a place that's now in part of Belarus called Vakovice, which is sometimes spelled with a W. It's a town that has been part of Poland, has been part of Russia, Lithuania, and so she comes from an Ashkenazi Jewish tradition. She's kind of the person in her family that I can find the least information about. I found way more information about her sister, even Naomi, who also lived in Houston, where Elizabeth Brandon was a professor at the University of Houston. It's where she spent most of her career, and even her parents. So I believe this is. I'm still trying to verify, but I'm pretty sure that this is her father on the right, Samuel Kaplan. Kaplan was her maiden name, and then and I even found her father's gravestone. This is in Houston. Pretty much all the family moved to Houston in the 30s and then later in the 40s. Not all at the same time, but she was also a musician. She often, I find lots of references in her notes about how she wishes she could sing, or that how she, that's not something that she can do, but she wished that she could. But she was an accomplished pianist and studied classical music. She also studied at the Sorbonne and the University of Vilna and Warsaw. Sorbonne is where she studied French, and it's also where she met her future husband, Sylvain, who I believe his name was originally Borchevsky, but and that's another thing that I learned was we always see Elizabeth Brandon, but I guess it's really Brandon because he's from France. He's from Montpellier, her husband. He was a medical doctor, and so they moved to the U.S. I think in 1939, I believe. Yeah, and originally, and initially, I think. Just a year later, so 1940, they settled in Houston, where he had a medical practice, and then she worked at the University of Houston. She eventually became department chair of the Romance Languages department at the University of Houston. So she really had an impressive academic career. She was awarded the Palmes Académiques from the French Ministry of Culture twice. She received a lot of awards. What always kind of surprised me was how few people I've been able to find that actually met her. Because, she passed away not all that long ago. She passed away in 2002. But she did a lot of her work, like I said, in her field work here, or mostly in Vermilion Parish, in the 50s. But I always just thought that was so funny that there weren't more people that knew her, that knew of her, that, had visited with her when she did her work here. So that was another thing that I wanted to find out more about. So her dissertation at the bottom is 1955, and it really is a great work if you have a chance to look at it. Okay, so another thing that I found out about her, again, like I said, there's really not a lot to find out. It's quite difficult. I've yet to find one photo of her, for instance. But she became very involved in Holocaust education. Her mother was killed during the Holocaust. She was killed in Auschwitz in 1943. And her father was in the military. He survived at least one of the wars in Siberia in 1946, and eventually moved to the U.S. to join her siblings. Naomi was quite a well-known figure. She passed away more recently, I think 2017, also in Houston. A pretty well-known figure in Houston in civic service and things. And so she and Elizabeth Brennan were both really important in the creation of the Holocaust Museum of Houston and different scholarships. Naomi's married name was Warren, so there's kind of a large foundation called the Warren Foundation in Houston for education. Okay, so I've been mostly focusing on her notes and also correspondence for now. And we'll look at one song at the end to leave some time for questions if we have any. So since the theme of the conference is diversity of Francophone music, I wanted to kind of focus on that too. She was very conscious of her diverse background, and being really an outsider, not just in Louisiana, but also kind of in the field as well of folklore studies and ethnomusicology. And one thing that you see a lot in kind of her more journal type notes in the special collections that I'm going through now is she kind of has a shared sentiment of not being from somewhere, or different peoples that have experienced different kinds of trauma, like the Acadian deportation or slavery. She could kind of see herself in some of those communities, and that I think was a very deep sort of driving force in her quest to learn more about the French-speaking people of Louisiana, which is often how she phrases it. She talks specifically about Acadians and Creoles of color and things, but generally she uses this phrase of le peuple français louisianais, or the French Louisiana people, or the French Louisianans, which I find interesting because those are terms that we don't hear too much, French Louisianan. But that's how she kind of broadly talks about it in her notes. Another thing that I thought was interesting, if you zoom out a bit and you look at what was going on in the field in Louisiana, especially in the 40s and 50s, you have, and maybe even a little bit before that too, quite a few dissertations that y'all might be familiar with, directed by Professor Broussard at LSU, like Marie Lahaye, what else? Alexander Hammett. There's quite a few. Aaron Montgomery. So these theses and mostly MA theses that are all available through the digital commons too, through LSU. Those theses are pretty interesting to look through. But there's kind of a pattern there. If you look at them, they're very localized. So you'll see titles like the Creole language of customs of St. Martin Parish, of Evangeline Parish. And in a lot of the cases, the students are from there, so they're doing work in their home parishes. That's quite a common thing when you look at that area, that period. So what she was doing was quite different, if you think about it that way, because she was not only not from Vermilion Parish, she's from very far away, but she was already, in the early 50s, thinking very widely about comparisons between the songs that she was finding and other catalog versions that she was finding in France or in Canada. And a lot of her dissertation is very comparative, and I think she was kind of ahead of the times in that sense, writing in the early 50s. Her being an outsider is something that comes up quite a bit, and I want to show you probably in the next, it's not a slide, it's a PDF, her kind of introduction to a work that was never actually finished. And then in the correspondence part of this project, I've been looking into her correspondence with Marguerite Darcourt, who was an ethnomusicologist, quite a well-known ethnomusicologist. I'm sure Roger's probably more familiar with than I am. Marguerite Darcourt in Paris. No, I don't know a whole lot about her, but just from looking a little bit online, I mean, there's a lot that she's done. And so she was kind of the person that was transcribing a lot of the music notation of the songs. And I thought that was really interesting too, because if you're thinking about in the 50s in Louisiana, so she's doing her field work here, working in Houston, you would think that there might be more local people that she would be working with to transcribe the songs, to the words and the music. But she wasn't. She had this really broad network of people that were quite famous. Like there's lots of letters between her and Joe Hickerson, Marguerite Dacour, who was in Paris. And you can tell through the letters that they weren't actually close friends. It doesn't seem like they would have really met and became friends while she was doing her studies at the Sorbonne. But this is who she was sending those cassettes and all her transcriptions to by mail. And so all these postcards, there are a lot of them, talk about, the delays, different things that they're disagreeing with. I think this might be one, maybe not, where she's complaining. Marguerite Dacour is complaining because Luc Lacourcière didn't agree with how she heard the lyrics and how she had to redo the whole thing.
Where does she live, Marguerite Dacour?
Paris.
Paris.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's their address, Avenue de Wavreau, Paris. It's interesting, you can find all these places on Google Maps, which I've done. But anyway, I wanted to share before I'm almost done, so it's okay. Let's see, it's going to be in a PDF here. Just wanted to show you a couple things that I find interesting. So zoom and share. All right, so y'all should be able to see that. This is, there's 3 little spots that I want to show you. So this is just a notepad, 8.5 by 11 notepad, that is supposed to be the introduction to a book, a folk song collection that she is talking about coming out in 1976. So this is quite a while before she passed away in 2002. So I'm not really sure why it never came out, because she sounds quite sure about it in the beginning. And so she talks about how this book started in 1955. That was the year that she defended her dissertation. 16 years after they arrived in the U.S. It's the bicentennial of the United States. She calls it my adopted country. She says, in a way, I myself represent the diversity and multiculturalism that is being emphasized this year. Born into an Ashkenazi Jewish traditional family, raised and educated in Yiddish, Russian, Polish, and French cultures. Settled in Texas, I chose yet another ethnical group to study, the French Louisianan. I am indeed gratified to be able to make my modest contribution to the understanding of the psychology of the modern Louisianan. So this is all supposed to be kind of her introduction to that book. There's also some interesting kind of back and forth with her and Marius Barbeau, who was on her committee, who was also well known. I mean, Luc Lacourcière and Marius Barbeau at the time were really kind of the most well-known ethnomusicologists in North America for French studies. So it was really a strong committee that she had, and she had obviously different relationships with each of them. You can tell that through their correspondence. Marius Barbeau was very encouraging and often was pushing her to publish another book. It seemed like her relationship with Luc Lacourcière might have been a little more, I don't want to say difficult, but maybe distant. So it's kind of interesting too to have that insight to these special collections. Also, this last part that I'll show you, still from this introduction of the never published folk song collection. It says a lot about the kind of questions she was asking. I wanted to find an explanation why a certain type of song coming from France survived in Louisiana while other types did not. Why are there no work songs nor religious songs in Louisiana? Was there black influence on the songs of the Cajuns? And if so, how much? Did the French islands in the Caribbean exercise an influence on the Louisiana song? Many expressions in the text puzzled me. Some seemed incongruous. So she talks about how in 1955, when Marius Barbeau was asking her to publish a book, she wasn't ready. She still had too many questions. And so these are the kind of questions that she she was asking. It's pretty interesting. So the last thing I'll show or share is just one of the songs that y'all probably are familiar with called La Délaissée. So she has four versions of this. So let me play it first. Let's see. I hope this doesn't mess anything up with the Zoom and stuff. I might need to mute myself. No, I can't mute myself. Okay, well, sure.
Well, that's from her typewriter.
Yeah.
Je suis la délaissée, il pleure nuit et jour, celui qui m'a trompé le cœur dans nos premiers amours. J'avais 15 ans à peine, vélo comme une rose, il y a fallu qu'il vienne m'empoisonner le cœur. C'est fermer ses caresses et c'est baisser nos peurs et ses fausses promesses qu'il me jette dans les pleurs. Moi qui croyais que tu m'aimais, moi qui t'aimais de tout mon cœur, et maintenant je vois le contraire, il faudra s'oublier.
So she collected 4 versions of these of this song in Vermilion Parish, and she was careful too to have a pretty representative list of informants, Creoles of color and people more of Acadian descent, French-speaking people, different ages, different types of education. So that theme of diversity of the conference, I think, this is a good example of the repertoire that she was focusing on. And she has, lots of analyses that were really, I think, kind of ahead of her time in her dissertation about how she was comparing these 4 different versions of the Délaissée song, using, Conrad Lafort and Patrice Poirot and different kinds of catalogs that she had access to at the time. So it's pretty interesting. I think there's a lot more to learn. I'm still just getting started, but thanks to all y'all for going through all the papers and making them available. All those, the recordings are available in the archives if y'all want to check out the other examples. There's really a lot that she collected. Any questions? I think that's all I had. I wanted to stop before 2. Yeah.
What songs did she bring that we didn't know before?
Can you repeat the question? There's some people.
Yeah. What songs did she bring that we didn't know before? I'm not sure I could really answer that because it's hard to know what we had before. She collected a lot of like love and like broken heart songs, marriage, wedding songs, and then less, fewer, but still quite a few like funny songs. A lot of les chansons de soldats, sort of like military songs, and that was something that she was interested in. You can find whole folders on her research on French soldiers of the period. So and those are pretty rare, especially those have not really survived the same way as a lot of other traditional songs about war songs and soldier songs and stuff, at least in Louisiana. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Mary, did you have something that, did you ever meet her?
I did.
You did? Okay. I thought you hadn't.
Find a microphone.
I remember asking you, and I think I misunderstood. I thought you said you hadn't met her.
I may be one of the few people that are still around who did meet her.
Mm-hmm.
Which way should I go?
You're there.
Yeah. She was at the University of Houston, and I I found out she was there, and I arranged to get her papers and her recordings. And I went over there because Carl Lindahl was at the University of Houston, and on one of those visits I went to visit her and met her. She was a really tall, stately grande dame, as Inés Catalan referred to her. So it was very interesting. She had obviously very sophisticated education. It was a very sophisticated lady, and it was kind of interesting that she had elected to collect so extensively in French Louisiana, especially Vermilion Parish, which was at the time she collected a lot of rural areas. There was also I mentioned this to you earlier. Erin Montgomery from the Montgomery family from Kaplan had done a lot of collecting herself, and there was a perception in the Montgomery family that Elizabeth had sort of, made use of Erin's stuff, and Erin was meaning to do a master's thesis and never got around to finishing it, and a lot of that stuff got folded into her Elizabeth's work. Yeah.
I thought she did finish, because I think I had it open, if I'm not mistaken. And she's also, I think, listed as one of the informants, which I thought was interesting. Another thing that's interesting, if you go look, I forget what box it is. It might be, I think it's 2. There's like 4 folders of Erin Montgomery in there, all notes from her work. So
Yeah, somehow she was collaborating with Erin, and a lot of that work ended up in Elizabeth's work. Apparently, Erin either ran out of gas or felt like it was already being used and couldn't use it again, or who knows what.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Well, thank you very much, Nathan.
That was good.
Thank you.
That's a fascinating story.
Yeah.
Her family was born in the same town as my grandmother.
That's right, yeah.
Well, and interestingly too, she was working right alongside Catherine Blanchette.
Yeah.
And there's not a whole lot of apparent connection or contact or anything. Yeah.
Yeah. I have some, we have to talk.
Okay, all right.
Are you sticking around at all?
Stick around until I have a meeting with Jordan at 3, but I'll be around until.
Okay, thanks. All right, I'll talk to you after. All right.